Werewolf of Defiance, Ohio. It's been over 50 years since the reported sightings of the Werewolf of Defiance flooded Defiance, Ohio, and it continues to be a topic today. Over 50 years have passed since the original reports rolled into the Defiance Police Department. Despite the turbulent political climate of the early 1970s, this story caused panic. Rampant unsolicited reports ensued. Meanwhile, there was a werewolf on the loose. Outside of the original news articles, not much exists in the way of evidence of the Defiance werewolf sightings. Unfortunately, any articles found these days consist primarily of conflicting information. The focus on theatrics, mystery, and whimsy has only served to dilute the sightings from the summer of 1972. This story has faced more than its share of scrutiny. Undoubtedly, small changes to the story over time have taken away from any authenticity it had. Marler stated that the legend has stuck to the town and locals still talk about it to this day, but our research has shown otherwise. While it's true that the legend has stuck to the town in a historical capacity, there are very few people who recall the incident. Those that do remember, however, don't recall much detail. Nevertheless, most of the town remains relatively unaware of the existence of their local cryptid. Werewolves. One common misconception about the original incidents is that they did not happen during a full moon. Common lore, however, would suggest that the days surrounding a completely full moon are also indicative of werewolf transformation, so while the moon wasn't full on July 25, 1972, it was a waxing gibbous moon. For those who want exact figures, it was at 98.18% illumination moon, which means it likely looked full to the naked eye. Were creatures, according to lore, are humans who have been cursed with the uncontrollable curse of transforming into a beast under the light of the full moon. These creatures are paranormal in nature because they are humans with an affliction that transforms them into beasts. Unsurprisingly, legends have existed across nearly every culture in history, with the oldest reference being from Petronius Arbiter's The Satyricon. The appearance of werewolves is most prevalent in American pop culture. Throughout the last century, movies, television, and literature have attempted to renew the vigor of werewolf lore ad nauseum. The depiction of were-creatures tends to range from comedic to horrific, and this vacillation is heavily reliant upon the genre in which they appear. Regardless of their portrayal, whether comical or frightening, they remain a product of a paranormal world of which scientists remain highly skeptical. Dogman. The dogman is a conceptualized werewolf-like creature native to American culture. Dogmen are not considered to be paranormal in nature, since they always exist in their beast state, as both half-dog and half-man. Sightings of these wolf-like cryptids have a history of reports from across the United States, but are most heavily centralized in the eastern half of the country. Cryptid canines of Ohio. For the past half-century, reported dogman sightings have been rampant throughout the state of Ohio. The most widely acknowledged case of sightings happened in the summer of 1972. Throughout the history of the Ohioan dogman, it has boasted a surprising variety of different physical description. Witnesses never seemed to agree whether it was presented as a bipedal humanoid or as a beast walking on all fours. Outside of Ohio, the most famous dogman in America is the Beast of Bray Road. It was reported from Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and the neighboring region beginning in the fall of 1989. The subsequent film inspired by real events. Is it a dogman or a werewolf? There's a mention of a 2004 encounter with an unidentified witness. The witness claimed to have had a close encounter with a large bipedal creature with a face that more closely resembled a dog than a human. Another witness report from August 2005, coming from the Liberty area, described a sighting of a creature that was black in color and possessed the head of a large dog. When witnesses were prompted to describe the creature, each person immediately mentioned that the creature was very hairy. Outside of this vague descriptor, the three witnesses gave similar reports of the creature's appearance. Stiegel. Deloy aptly summarized the physical appearance of the beast as it was reported by various sources. All reports agreed it was very tall, between 6 and 9 feet. The creature is bipedal but often looks as if it's on all fours, as it has been seen hunched over on several occasions. Many reported that despite having an animal's head, the creature resembled a man, or at the very least an upright wolf. Reports said the creature was covered in hair and that it ran around barefoot. Strangely, in place of human feet, it had large hairy paws and wolf-like claws. potentially the strangest part of the description by comparison was that the creature seemed to be wearing blue jeans and a dark shirt. The Werewolf of Defiance. Amidst the heat of the summer of 1972, the residents of Defiance, Ohio suddenly began reporting sightings of a werewolf. An alarming number of people claimed to see a large hairy beast running around town, dressed in rags. Such an insurgence of reports came in that it was far too great for the police to ignore. According to news sources, the first encounter with the Werewolf of Defiance happened around 4 in the morning on July 25, 1972. Railroad worker Ted Davis was working on the Norfolk and Western train lines at the time of his first encounter. As Davis was connecting the air hoses of 2 train cars, something on the ground caught his gaze. 2 huge hairy paws stood before him. No sooner did Davis raise his eyes in curiosity than the creature hit him with a 2x4. Davis had seen enough to describe the creature as approximately 6 feet tall, hunched over, and hairy. Less than a week later, on July 30th, Ted Davis and his colleague Tom Jones reported a second sighting of the creature. Davis faced ridicule from Jones, who believed the whole incident to be a joke amongst the crewmen. All of that stopped that night when Jones witnessed the creature for himself at the edge of the rail yard. Jones was a believer. The creature disappeared into the brush at the same time an unlucky grocer was driving home late from his shift that night. According to the unnamed witness's statement, a large dog-like creature ran across the road in front of him. After Jones and Davis noted the creature's absence, they heard screaming from a car stopped on a nearby road. The Crescent News was the largest skeptic of the bunch and reported that 2 of the incidents occurred last week and 1 last night. None have happened during a full moon, despite the evidence to the contrary. In fact, the first incident happened the day before the full moon. Mahler suggested that the investigation should have been more thorough. In the original report from August 3, 1972, the Blade stated that one man, a train crewman switching trains, said that he was approached from behind and struck on the shoulder. Later in that same article, Davis is quoted as having claimed, "The creature ran away before Davis could say anything." This uncertainty questions the legitimacy of the claim. Was Davis ever attacked by the creature? In a follow-up article, the Blade discussed how most people in the area believed it was simply a hoax, a man in a costume, or rather, just some nut running loose. Werewolf panic. The problem the Defiance Police Department seemed to face was not that people were reluctant to report what they had seen, but that the panic caused people who hadn't seen it to begin calling in due to their concern over the situation. One woman called in with such concerns due to her house being adjacent to the train track. She had not seen the creature but stated that the reported sightings had put her in a state of shock. The initial reports by the local Defiance news outlet, the Crescent News, suggests that they believed the whole thing to be a joke. Journalist Ellen Armstrong added humor to the incident when she reported it in her article on August 2, 1972. She went as far as to state that the police were possibly armed with silver bullets and sharpened stakes. Even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is clear and bright. Defiance police, possibly armed with silver bullets and sharpened stakes, are on the lookout for a wolf man who on 3 occasions has accosted persons near the Norfolk and Western Railroad tracks in the vicinity of 5th Street and Swift and Company. 2 of the incidents occurred last week and 1 last night. None has happened during a full moon. According to Defiance Police Department, 1 man was attacked and struck on the shoulder with a 2x4, however managed to get away from the assailant. 2 other attempts on residents, both met, have not been successful, so the department can't say if the motive is robbery or just to scare people. No one has reported neck bites. He, she, or it is described as very tall with some kind of an animal head. Police Chief Don F. Breckler today said if anyone sees the subject, they should not attempt to apprehend him but call the department immediately, giving a description and the direction in which he was heading. The attacks have occurred during the early morning hour, from 1:30 a.m. to 4:20 a.m., before sunrise. Police remained alert to werewolf reports. The Toledo Blade also began running a series of articles, starting August 3, 1972, on the strange sightings that had popped up in Defiance just a week earlier. Anyone not in the immediate vicinity of the occurrences readily made light of the situation. The Defiance police, however, remained steadfast in their duties to protect and serve their small community. The reports baffled the authorities. Unsure what to think about the incidents being reported, they remained skeptical despite the number of sightings reported. All of the descriptions were vague. Police Chief Breckler was quoted saying, "We didn't release it to the news media when we got the first report about a week ago, but now we're taking it seriously for the safety of our people." Breckler approached the reports with seriousness. Nevertheless, he was adamant in his belief that it was simply a person wearing a disguise, such as a mask. When probed about his thoughts on the incidents, Breckler admitted that he was inclined to think it might be a local person, since none of the other area towns had anything like. And in each case, the werewolf had been seen in the same area of Defiance. At the time of Nicely's article in the Crescent News on July 25, 2013, there were still a few officers remaining in the city from the time, but none seemed to remember the details of the case, and none of the reports remain at the police department. Joanne Barton, who worked dispatch at the time, insists that people ask her about the incident regularly, and her response is always the same, that she doesn't really recall it. Granted, at the time of asking, 40 years had already passed, which makes sense that department worker Floyd Stites had much of the same response when asked about the happening. Nicely. Were these true werewolf sightings, or was it all just a hoax? Since there was no physical evidence to fall back on, it's hard to say. One thing is certain. If it were just a man in a mask, would it have fooled so many? It's easy to look back on it from a modern perspective and reason that it could have been a realistic mask. However, in consideration of the technology available at the time for prop masks and practical effects, even large budget movies couldn't create something altogether convincing. It's clear that these people truly believed they saw a creature, and not simply a man. For if it were indeed a man, it would have been likely that the reports would have mentioned a man in a mask running around and causing mischief.